Hey, this is Happy Sattva, and I'm here on another curiosity chat to talk about some expounding a little on the idea of frictionlessness and living from the center of ourselves. I'd like to envision a circle when I think about myself or I think about anyone in existence, and the circle being more like a sphere. And if we and all of our life experiences and the way that we interact with each other, anything that we put out into the world fills up and becomes this globe or this sphere around us. And we ourselves are the summation of all of this sphere. And the sphere can interact and overlap with the other things around it. So it's permeable. Everything can interact and affect other spheres that are nearby, coming in and out and affecting them. And we can also be affected then by someone else's sphere overlapping our own. But if we go with this concept of circle concept, then and it also can be concluded that we ourselves, our most still part of ourselves, our purest form of ourselves, the most basic and elementary and succinct part of ourselves is at the center of that sphere. At the apex is what I like to call the apex of the sphere. And recognizing this centrality, you can then begin to live a life where you pull back into the perspective of the central apex of your own globe of sphere. And everything that's coming out from you from that place, extending out, some can term, I think of it in terms of the ego or the action of self, the way that we interact and affect and bring in effect from the rest of the world. And I'm going to plug in. So if we're in this sphere, and if the sphere is ourselves, and the outer portions of this are our effect and our ego and our physical world and our actions and what we're putting out and bringing in. And then the center of ourself is what all of that mounts from. And I also envision this thing moving. It's in constant motion, like a spin. And if we think of centrifugal force, when there is a circle spinning, the further away you come from the centrality of that circle, the apex of the circle, the more force, the more velocity is felt. And so if we pull back to the centrality of that circle, to the center of ourselves, then in that is the least amount, I would say, void of friction and of velocity. It's the center point that all is spinning around. And that center point is where our true self is and where we can view the rest of the world from. And when we come back into that point where we can view from that center apex of ourselves, we gain a view of all things existing outwardly around us and even from us as ineffectual to who we are, because they're all spinning out away from us. They're all these exterior things of us, and they aren't the center of ourself. They aren't the trueness of us. And this, since all things spin off of this apex of self, that's where we venture into the idea of limitlessness, because as all of these things coming off the self arose and arrived from the center self, and the center self is limitless. That's our creation energy. What I think of as the gateway or the veil of consciousness turning from thought matter into physical matter, calling things into manifestation with our intention of outward expression. So, if all of these things arise from the center point, and it's because of the center point that they arose and are, then that goes to say that anything can arise from there. And once we peer back into this space of the power of being in the center, that the center, even acknowledging that the center exists, that the apex exists, then we have an unlimited choice to form out from ourselves any thing to which we want to experience and that we want to become and be. Anything that we want to experience, we can then fashion for ourselves and choose with consciousness that thing to come. And it's in the stillness, power, the still power of being in center and pulling back into that perspective of apex, that we don't push out into the existence around us to create and forcibly obtain the thing that we want to see. Instead, we understand that pulling back into that center, there is then liberation of the power of creation to unfold and then fold itself back into shape of the thing that we are calling out into our conscious, intended, creative intention. So it's a paradox of sorts, because we think that we have to set a goal and then determine with our ego and all of our strength and our might and our skill and our conniving to go out and obtain for ourselves and own this result. But in that, there's a lot of destruction. And when we pull back into the power that is our center self, our apex, and in realization of the power that is there, that is eternally there, that exists beyond your body and beyond the experiences that you're in, beyond the life that you're living now, when we pull back into that apex of being, and we live from a place of then intending and creating and being in integrity with that space, then all of the things that are then other spheres coming into contact with what is now our sphere that's living from a very still and intended place, those other things start to meld their shape and their effect around the effect of our now different vibration than the one that used to be forcibly going out and conquering and becoming and doing. Now it is something that is more of a calling into place, and that calling into place through a different vibration of central self has its own amazing effect then outward, reverberating outward into the experiences that encounter you. And the interesting thing for me is that in this way, I create less friction with the elements that are encountering me. And because I'm not forcibly going out and kind of churning against tides and things, instead, I am intending and asking for a balance and a centrality and a neutrality and balance in myself. And that's what I'm presenting out. And with that balanced self, then I'm reverberating out a sensation of balance and calling then to the elements around me to join me in balance. So what ends up happening is the experiences that you have that surround you are less likely to bombard you and bump you and cut against you because you're no longer bombarding and going against them. But what you experience is what one can experience is that those things around you now join you and are supportive because they are frictionless against you, and instead just have a balanced equality with you in energy that is fitting like a puzzle in the spaces that you are occupying and that they're occupying. And there's this filling of a jar. Almost, I have the image of when a gaseous substance fills a chamber, like a jar, that closed jar, and you impact that jar with an influx of gas. Let's say like a cloud, and that goes inside and it fills every aspect of the interior of that jar. And in that way, I sense the balanced nature of the elements that encounter around us as we live from a space of central apex. And in that way, now to get to the point where you're able to sense that central apex of yourself and live from there, it's a journey of finding what is your own heart. And so much of our existence is spent neglecting what is our heart, which is the thing that is central to us and the thing that is the voice of wanting and needing and has a trueness to it, to the own integrity of your own self and what your existence is and what your being is and what you're made of and what you're here to experience and cause into a positive action. We neglect that heart through discounting what its own things say to us, and we live in a bit of dysregulation with it. And instead we join into sort of an anthem of the society we may live in, or the culture, the family, the things expected from us, and the obligations that we oblige ourselves to, instead of being tethered then at the center of our own heart and living from there with the expectation to honor it and live from a place of feeding it and giving it what it needs. We tether ourselves to others, others' wishes for us, others' expectations of us. And when we're tethered outside of ourselves, we cannot be centered in our own self and have a place of balance and ease. When we're tethered outside of ourselves, we're obliging our own creative energy to the creative ideas of someone else. But our creative energy was never meant to serve anyone else's creative thought. It was only meant to serve our own. So in that, there is a rationale of, irrationale, I guess, of committing one's energy to someone else that it doesn't make any sense to do. when the fulfillment of that creative thought can only be fulfilled by one's own creative strengths and energy. So it's pulling back from, kind of like letting yourself off the hook for the things that you've committed that are slowly wearing at you and causing dis-ease of your own mental, emotional, physical self. They aren't in balance with yourself. And it's pulling back and just a realization. And I don't mean neglecting anything that would cause harm. What I do mean, and that is just talking of the effect, all of the things that are branching out from that inner aspect. What I'm talking of, I'm not even considering, I don't advise anything that's out. This is no type of advice for anything that's an outward action of any sort. What this is we pull in and see ourselves, and we turn our ear towards ourselves. And when we do that and we listen and we say, what is it that you want? What is it that you need to our own self? to our heart. And then when we hear it, we don't belittle it or discount it or throw out what it says. We don't cause it to shy away out of shame, but we really take for what our heart tells us as truth, and we believe in it, and we take it almost like a friend, and we be a very good friend to ourselves. If your friend came to you and they said, "This is what I need," you wouldn't, if you cared about them, then you wouldn't turn them away. You wouldn't shame them. Instead, you'd say, "Oh, this is what you need. I'll do whatever I can to do that for you. And if I don't have the ability to do it, then we'll find a way. I'll find the way." And it's with that type of love and care that when you turn that back onto your own heart, you heal 1,000 wounds and you free it from 1,000 bondages. Just that tiny, micro, seemingly very small belief in your own heart's needs and validation of your own heart and what it needs. Just that tiny validation seems tiny, but it's actually cataclysmic to the heart. When you start to work with your heart in that way, where believing what it says, hearing it, taking time to listen to it, it speaks immediately. It's nothing that is it's nothing that needs any amount of deliberation at length. It's immediate. Speak, speak, speak. And when it realizes then that it's heard, when you come back to it with an answer of validation, not dismissing what your heart says that it needs, you'll find it much easier every time then that you listen to yourself. The heart will be eager to tell you, to share. And soon you become where it's not, you don't have to so much turn to it. You start understanding your heart better, like a friendship, like a relationship would be. You start to understand it and know it because you're hearing and having those conversations with it, and you're validating it and loving it and caring for it. So then we start living, instead of from a place of, well, I want these things, I've got to go out and I've got to do it, and this is the way to do it. Instead, we live from a place of, what do you need, heart? The heart tells you what it needs. And you say, okay, I hear you, and I will give that to you. And with that simple intention, you move forward in your life, and it is answered then back to your heart in tiny aspects of your day-to-day physical world. You start giving your heart what it needs, and you start then, your whole entire life is changed. Your whole sphere is changed then. Your entire sphere is no longer living way out here in this friction effect towards others, and it even back on itself. All of the friction created there. Instead, you're living from a place where this heart is being exactly what it is, who it is, and this extension of itself out into what is the physical world is supporting it, because it's doing what that heart is saying it is and it needs. And so then you have where you are living in a space that is in integrity with your own self. There is then a cause of the interactions that you have with the things around you begin to settle in. The things that don't reverberate in that same fashion fall away, and the things that do, they settle in, they come towards you because of the magnetism of that vibration calling into place the things that would support that thing being there. So in this peaceful, calm support of your own heart, you find that in that loving support of your own heart, you find that then the rest of what is around you also loves and supports what it is that heart is, what you are, who you are. And in that is a multitude of happiness. And I wish that for you.